What is at the heart of the Pacers' defensive struggles of late? What can they do about it, and what to make of the Pacers' young players playing in more challenging situations? Jake Query of 107.5 The Fan joins to talk about all that and the resolution of the fine levied by the NBA to the Pacers. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin, and today, much to get to with Jake Query of 107.5 The Fan. The Pacers defense right now is really bad, 130 plus allowed in 3 straight games. Their young guys are playing in much more challenging situations for good and for bad. What to make of that? Who's popping? What matters for next season? And the fine the NBA levied to the Pacers. There was been more on that this week, as Rick Carlisle talked about it. The NBA released a statement. We talk about that and our opinions on that issue and so much more. Really fun conversation. I always love chatting with Jake and getting his stance. And as we're recording, the Pacers announced that Obi Toppin is questionable to play tonight against the Hornets. How about that? We didn't talk about that, but that is, of course, of serious consideration for the Pacers. If he plays, seeing who he plays with, if any of the new guys, and how he plays will, of course, be very critical. I'll talk about that tomorrow, but if you were looking for more on that, I apologize. That's all I got for you. We'll see if he plays. Let's just get right to it with Jake Query. Jake Query is here. You hear him every single weekday, middle of the day on the radio. Unfortunately, sometimes I have to yell at him on Thursdays about the Pacers. Today, he's yelling at me about the Pacers. Jake Query, hello, how are you?
I am well, Tony. And yourself?
I am very well in these days where it feels like there's a really important NBA game every night. There was Pistons Spurs this week. The Combine's in town, so Indy's buzzing. Do you like the Combine? Are you a Combine fan?
I'm a fan of seeing how many times Eddie White can tweet out the same 12-year-old picture of people that used to be relevant. I guess if the Colts have a first-round pick, it's fun, but admittedly, I understand the enthusiasm people have for the Combine, and there have been certainly years where it was much more relevant to the Colts' future than it is this year. But I kind of had gotten to the point where it's a necessary evil, if you want my honest opinion. But it is, listen, I appreciate what it does for the city, for sure.
I like that it creates lore of certain Starbuckses as well. What a great event for our lovely city. Jake, we're here to talk not about the Combine, but about the Indiana Pacers, who have lost all 4 of their games since the All-Star break, who have a lot to consider with their record and not in the normal way that they think about their record, who are playing some young players in weird situations. And all this is important context to say that, Jake, I don't know how you felt watching this team of late, but this defense is shocking recently. It's so terrible. They can't guard anybody. 3 of their 14 games giving up over 130 points this season have been in the last 3 games. What have you made of this? Because I get that they're playing different groups and different young players, but even their established guys can't guard anybody right now.
Yeah, I think it's a little of everything, right, Tony? I mean, the reality is this, and that is I think we know where the season is for them. And I get that the players are still professionals, right? But if we really break down, and we could probably sit here and do 2 hours on this, but the reality is from the time that Haliburton went down and going into this season, and initially, of course, when Haliburton goes down, you think that you're still going to have Miles Turner. At least I think the expectation for a lot of people was that. So obviously things changed before you go out for game number 1. You're missing 2 of your starters. You obviously have no Toppin, et cetera. I think initially the game plan was, okay, we got to make do with what we have. Once it got to the point that it was very clear the playoffs were not going to be a possibility, then suddenly you're rotating through a consistent change of players of 10-day contracts and G Leagues. You know this better than anybody because you have to, know all the different kinds of contracts. What I'm getting at here is I really think that what you're seeing is the deficiency defensively, which they've had spells of that even when they had, their core group together of periods where the defense just completely lapsed. But I just think it's really hard to do when even if you've got 3 to 4 of your 5 mainline players out there, okay, when you know what the reality of the season is, and in addition to that, when you are never getting consistency in terms of the group that you're on the floor with, I just think it all becomes a byproduct. But I think a big part of that is just simply the fact of they know the reality, right? I mean, they know. And so therefore, even if it's not in your conscience of what the reality is, it subliminally creeps in where you just kind of find yourself going through motion. And I'm not damning them for that. But I think that absolutely has to be somewhat of a factor of what's in play.
I have wondered that when, like, if a player messes up, if they, like, I think it's good for young players right now who are getting more chances than normal that they don't really have to look over their shoulder when they make a mistake or miss. They can just move on to the next play. But in general, if for everybody there is an element of like, oh, well, you know what I mean? Because of what you're talking about, where they know that it's still important that they get better and work through these things, but it's not as damaging to like the franchise's immediate goals if things go poorly for a possession. And something else that I think you said that's very true impression is like last year as their defense got better, right? They started the season pretty rough on defense and finished 14th. Was Miles Turner talked about this. He felt like his chemistry on defense got better with a lot of the Pacers perimeter players, right? Him and Drew got better at pick and roll defense together, him and Aaron, right? Pascal's defense improved throughout the season working off of his teammates. You know, for a lot of what's going on right this second, even with, you know, I would say five of the rotation guys for next season played last night, but Cam Jones started and played 30 minutes. And like, you know, Kobe Brown's been on the team for 5-6 games, whatever it is. You know, it's still very new. And there's a lot of guys who don't have any this is like an under-discussed kind of just general thing, but like defensive chemistry working with these players that certainly will lead to struggles defensively that you're seeing right now. And I think over the course of a game, what you mentioned and that factor that it'll matter for next year, they need to get these reps now, is all kind of culminating in like, holy cow, they can't guard anything right now. And it's not of like a massive concern. They certainly need to defend better, but it will be of concern next season. They need to figure at least something out to me better than this.
You know, in covering, let's go back to the combine.
Okay.
You know, in covering the NFL, one of the more interesting conversations I had, and I think it was with Anthony Costanzo, who was a former longtime left tackle for the Colts. And I asked Anthony Costanzo once, is it better to be on an offensive line that has 2 10s and then let's say 3 5.5 or 6s, or to have 5 that are all a 7? And he's like, undoubtedly, it's about having the 5 7s if they are consistently playing alongside one another. Because on an offensive line, so much of the strength of the line is not in how good its 2 main players are, but in the understanding of where the other player is going to be. So if you miss a block or you get beat here or a blitz is coming there, the instinctive nature of knowing what the guy to the right or left of you, exactly where he's going to be, so you know how to react to that situation. And I think the same thing applies with defense in the NBA.
I like that.
You can have 5 guys out there who might individually be 5 really good defenders, but Gary Payton and Dennis Rodman on the floor together in a game that they're not familiar with one another, their level of expertise defensively probably lags a little bit because of the lack of intuition and instinct of where the other one's going to be and how they need to immediately react out of a bad situation. And I think that's part of what you're seeing here is, even Pascal Siakam and Aaron Nesmith and TJ McConnell, they're used to playing with one another. But they're not necessarily used to playing with Micah Potter and Ethan Thompson as the other 2 guys on the floor. And where are those guys going to be and how are they going to react? I think all that comes into play.
And what's the term you hear all the time is on a string, right? All 5 defenders on a string. Like they're off a string right now. No one ever phrases it like that. But I certainly think that's true. What you're saying, I really like that comparison to an offensive line. I think I might stick that in my vernacular for the future because that is certainly what's happening. And like, even if you mention, a Gary Payton or whatever, a really elite individual guy, like Andrew Nemhart is that, but okay, that's great. When his man isn't guarding the ball, there's, he still has to do other things and the whole team has to do other things. And there's just so many colossally bad breakdowns and the rim is wide open. It's like, wait, how many points in the paint did the Washington Wizards just score? Like the Sixers scored over 80 last night. It's just a layup line for these teams. And granted, the Sixers are good and have star players who can get to the basket, but it's been like shocking to me. And it's really conflicting for me of like, this is a time of the season where very clearly development and playing unique or newer lineups and putting guys in more challenging roles. Jarris Walker, Kobe Brown, Cam Jones, all these guys are doing that. But also, like, you need some successes and results to walk out of the season and go, great. In the last 1/3 of the season, we learned these 5 things about all these players. And right now, they're learning that these guys can't guard altogether, which is exceedingly problematic. I have no more defensive notes of late unless you have any more to add on that.
Well, the other question that I have, and the other thing that I'm not very good at, with this year, Tony, I just think when you look at Quentin Jackson, you look at Cam Jones, you mentioned last night against Philly, guys that get opportunity, Micah Potter, and they play well and they score. And you say to yourself, okay, so they do have this is really great because look how much this is going to, how great it's going to help them once everybody's back and whatever else. But just because Cam Jones in the starting role of a game can come out and hit your first 8 points, can he do that exact same thing if he's being needed to spot fill 11 minutes in late March and he hasn't played in 15 games? These are all questions that have to be examined and I think make this season still intriguing, even though it's obviously a lost year.
Everybody, quick breaks. We can talk about 2 awesome groups of people. First up is 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like confetti, craze, fruity rainbow, or cotton candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and there's so many choices for the number 1 pick of the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. But I'm picking the same one I pick every time I talk to you guys. The cherry, the bold cherry, candy style flavor. It's sweet with a light tart, classic red fruit profile, bright, punchy taste. It's smooth. It's easy to recognize. So many good ones. So the berry, the grape, I like all of the fruity flavors. They're all quite delicious. And 5 Hour Energy shots, not only are they delicious, they give you a boost with 0 sugar. A lot of upcoming flavor innovations are planned for them that you could try it yourself. If you need to pick me up or anything energy related during the day, this might be the perfect way for you to do it. So find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Let's also very quickly talk about Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. Puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game. It'll have tickets ready, and within minutes. If you love seeing the all-in price up front, this is for you. No surprise fees at checkout. You can see the view from your seat before actually making the decision. Their zone deals will help you find standout places to sit when you just pick the area you want to go. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Check out Locked On Clippers to hear more about Ben Mathurin and Isaiah Jackson playing for their new team. And of course, check out the Everydayer Club. Get Locked On Pacers ad-free with the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access. You can join at the URL in the description of this episode. Now let's get right back to it with Jake Query. Well, you got to my next topic, ironically, but that's it's funny you say that because what made Potter and Jones both of their career high nights against Philly so noteworthy to me is they both did it in ways that's like, this is reasonably what your role would be if you were asked to play on a competitive Pacers team even next year, right? Cam, go spot up in the corner a few times and then occasionally drive and take a floater when you have space to do so. Micah Potter just mashed on some screens and rolled and had great chemistry with the ball handlers. Like, maybe it was more often than they would do it normally, but it wasn't like, Jarris Walker right now is playing like this crazy role. He's asked to create a lot and shoot and all these things. It's like he might do some of that next year, but not to this kind of volume. I felt like Potter and Jones on Tuesday were at least in like normal-ish roles. And that's kind of what the next thing to me that I want to talk to you about is right now, as they, get into the deeper parts of the season, like Cam Jones is playing 30 minutes and he's playing 2 guard at this time and 1 guard this time. And Jarris Walker is initiating all the time and has some like, whoa, behind the back passes and some like, whoa, we threw the ball to the guy in the third row level passes. And, Potter's doing more things. Kobe Brown is passing the ball and taking 5 threes a night. Like they're mixing and matching these young guys. How are you feeling right now about the development of these guys who at present moment may be trending towards like a reserve for the Pacers next year, but could certainly have a role that matters or one injury away from playing like a significant role next season?
Okay, let's start with the big one. And it's easy to forget his age because he's been with the team for a little bit and you feel like, man, this is a slow developer. But I think we might have finally and I'm using finally with hesitation,
Uh-oh.
but I think we might have finally seen a breakthrough with Jarris Walker.
I agree.
And in that, I mean this, Tony, and I wonder this. I wonder if we weren't waiting for the wrong thing for him all along, because there's an unfair thing that happens of where you're drafted. And because of where he was drafted, it was like, this is a guy that should be giving them 20 and 10, but this team doesn't need that when it's healthy.
No.
And I wonder this, and tell me if this makes sense. I always marvel at Miles Turner. To me, his biggest contribution was he was such a really good piece at coming up to the high post, getting an entry pass, and then holding for a split second to determine whether or not that pass then was going to be parlayed into one down to, like, say, Siakam on the block, or back out to the wing for the rotation of the outside.
100%, Jake. I've talked about this being the most important role of a Pacers center all season. I totally agree.
Now, here's my question. Is it possible that because last night, and when I say last night, we're recording this after the Philly game, there was a play last night where Jarris Walker flashed into the middle of the lane, and I can't remember who threw it into him, but he instinctively parlayed that pass into a quick, basically, deflection down to Siakam, and they got a quick basket. And I realized that the combination of the hand speed, if you will, and the vision of Jarris Walker, could Jarris Walker actually be that guy that is a bigger player that can defend on the post, but then offensively flash up and begin that rotation of what I'm talking about? Because they have not been able to replicate that out of Miles Turner. And I don't know that Zubac is going to be able to do that. So if you're looking for that piece, were we missing something in terms of the vision and passing ability of Jarris Walker? That, I'm not saying it's 100% there at this point, but is there the entry level point there with him where he can develop into that sort of a role for the Pacers? So that's my thought on Walker. Potter, I think I like what Potter does. I think Potter he's not a true 5 really, but he kind of is a power 4, but has some outside shooting ability. Potter strikes me as the type that if he is your 12th man who's giving you 10 to 12 quality minutes a night, you're really good. If you're relying on him for 25 to 28 a night, you're probably winning 25 to 28 games, right? And then Jay Huff, I think, can be now more so the Miles Turner kind of player, because he doesn't have to be that night in and night out once Zubac is in there, and that's your center. But he can give them spurts where they can resort back to that style of play with that position at the 5, because they're going to go in stretches. And you know that then if you've got to put tone and rebound crashing, down low out of that position, then you bring Zubac back in. And so you only do spurts. So those, the other guys too, the Ethan Thompson and Quentin Jackson, I like a lot. He could score. I've always kind of wondered what keeps him from being, say, a two-way player. He can get you buckets, no question. But I think we also know with the depth where they are at that position, who and where he is. So, those are the 3. I mean, Huff, Furphy's an incomplete, obviously, but I know they like him a great deal. But Walker, Huff, and Potter, those are the 3 from this year's season that I think we will see. The minutes that they got are the going to be the ones that benefit them the most moving forward.
Certainly agree that those 3 are potentially wiggling their way into something for next year. Huff's interesting because, like, one fun subplot of the season is he going to play all 82 games, and he'll have, like, he won't get talked about this way, but he's had like 3 seasons to me. His first season is, oh my gosh, this guy has no idea how to play in the Pacers style, right? Like, it was clearly too fast for him. He got benched for Isaiah Jackson and then was like the 3rd string center behind Tony Bradley at times. Early in the season, 2 of his appearances this season, he was going to get a DNP, but the Pacers just got blown out so much that he came in garbage time, right? And then he figured out what he needed to do, and his defensive impact really grew, and he became a nightly player. And like, okay, this guy can be their backup 5. He gets the system, and that was important because I have fewer questions about him for next year, just because he's already been the backup 5 for a playoff team. That already happened in his career, right? So I believe in what he'll do impact wise, but now he's in the third season of kind of, hey, you can do kind of whatever you want. Like, go explore your skill set in the studio space. Here, you're going to be the backup five. Next year, go play with TJ and figure that out. But Jarris and Potter are both doing interesting things. I agree with your assessment of Walker, like as a hub passer kind of guy, because he played some ball handling roles at Houston and in high school, and that's kind of been overblown, but he still has some shot creation chops. The play that I liked against Philly, he caught it on the right wing. And sometimes when he is open enough to shoot, he stops the ball because he thinks, should I shoot it or should I move it or dribble? And he was a wide open for a three, and he just caught it and immediately drove to the basket and flipped a pass to Potter when he got down low. And then he didn't even score on the possession. But I was like, he is figuring out the read much quicker, like before the ball even comes to him. And that's a big thing for the way the Pacers want to play. And if he's going to be fighting for their 9th or 10th spot in the rotation next year, getting better at that specific one thing is huge for him and what they're going to be next year. So obviously it's significant that he rediscovered his three-pointer and made enough threes in the second third of the season that he stayed on the floor every night and clearly got more confident. But now he's adding more to his game where that game ends, he goes 3 for 13 and doesn't even defend that well. And he still found ways to contribute and produce with the rebounding, the passing, the movement. That was not happening earlier this season. That's huge for him next year. Potter too, like he's fighting to be on the team, period. His non-guaranteed next season, team option. Same situation Tony Bradley was in at this time last year, albeit for a competitive team. And, if you're fighting for a spot on the team, scoring a career high and proving that you can, make plays in the pick and roll and fight with Joel Embiid is like certainly a reasonable start. So I agree that those three are something. I think Quentin Jackson's trying to play his way into, and probably has already played his way into, a standard contract for the rest of this season. Will he get anything beyond that? Who knows? But I think he's kind of proven. He's had 3 games in a row, Quentin Jackson has, where I'm like, man, he's kind of had a quiet night, and I look up and he has 12 points on like 4 shot attempts or something crazy, like just a quality 6th or 7th guard,
Jackson, to me, I mean, Tony, there are games where he's gone in and given you 25.
Yeah. Yes.
And so you're like, what's, and I don't know what it is that's missing. You know what I mean? Of what's holding him.
One more break, everybody. Let's talk about Indeed. Workplace chaos. Deadlines are stacking up. Your inbox is overflowing. The one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs, because they'll help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with the skills, experience, and location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's the stat that says it all. In this minute, I'm going to be talking to you. Companies like yours make 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed's data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed-sponsored jobs. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. They'll check all your boxes, and listeners of this podcast will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show and this podcast by saying you heard about it on Locked On Pacers. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. I have a theory if you want to hear it.
Go ahead.
So people, when you talk about shot creation, like Quentin Jackson's ability to create open shots for the Pacers all comes from the fact that he's so fast and athletic. And that really sticks him in a box in terms of what positions he can play, because the rest of their guards can execute an action, start a play, run a pick and roll. You can trust them to create in that way. Quentin Jackson just opens up the defense by like flying to the rim, and that still counts. That's still creating a shot. But there are some games where that's not as helpful, or there are some games where his matchup means that won't be as effective. And there are some games where that's going to be like the most helpful thing he can do for the Pacers. So it's not like traditional point guard creation for the rest of the team, but it is still something that there are nights where you're like, oh my gosh, no one can guard Quentin Jackson right now.
One of the things I love about Quentin Jackson, by the way, if he's QJ, that means he's actually just the opposite JQ. And I mean, that's right. Like, who wouldn't want to be the opposite of this, right? But he, I don't know. I haven't paid enough attention to him defensively, and I think maybe that's an area where he might be a bit of a liability, and they'd like to see more. But he does seem to be a guy, Quentin Jackson, that he seems to be a guy that's well liked by his teammates. I've noticed that when he hits shots and things like that, he seems to mesh well with them. And I think you have to give any player credit that gets on two ways or goes back and forth and that kind of thing, to when their number is called, they still deliver, because
Yep.
I can understand kind of getting into a situation where you almost sulk in that moment, or you resent those moments. And I think he's looked good for that. I like him. Whether he's around, I don't know, but I like him.
On-ball defense, I think, is pretty good and pesky. Off-ball defense, sometimes when the ball goes away from him, you can literally see him stand more upright. Like that's the next thing for him on the defensive end. And I would say that's normally the case for like a younger player, but he's not younger. He's like 27. It's more about experience for him. Last thing, Jake, I want to ask you about. This is the last time I will talk about this because this topic will now be dying, I think, unless it becomes a he said, she said between the Pacers and the NBA. Response from both the Pacers and the NBA about the fine yesterday after Rick Carlisle on you guys' radio station talked about his emotions on this. Do you have any general thoughts on how this all went on Tuesday?
Yeah, I think, as I said on my radio show, I think, first off, I think Carlisle, it was a very strategic move by Carlisle. I don't think, you mentioned I'm sorry, when talking about Jarris Walker. And with Jarris Walker, how you can kind of see now that there's more intuition and less an instinct and less thinking things through. And I remember when Rick Smits was a young player, you could see with Rick Smits, when he would get the ball in the post, you could literally see his brain working of processing what he needed to do.
Yeah.
And in Rick Carlisle's case, when I watch him on the sidelines and everything that he does, it seems like his brain, he's like that meme gif or whatever you want to call it of Alan from The Hangover with the numbers running all over the place. And I think that Rick Carlisle's brain works that way. He's always thinking kind of a step ahead or looking around the corner. And when he said those things on our radio station and talking about the fine and being very transparent about the process of the Pacers getting fined by not playing Aaron Nesmith in a game against Utah, I think he kind of checkmated the NBA. And he basically said, okay, if you want to tell us that this is your explanation, I'll tell the whole world that, and we'll see where it comes out. And then the NBA comes out with a statement where they didn't necessarily verify whether or not they interviewed Aaron Nesmith throughout the course of the process. I think he put them in the position where the NBA had to get then kind of defensive instead of offensive. And so my assumption would be that this is the end of it, because I don't think the NBA is going to poke that bear again. And I think, and I firmly believe this, and I certainly welcome, if I'm wrong, of someone to prove it. But my belief, Tony, is and always has been that the NBA selected the Pacers and the Jazz as the two teams they were going to make an example of when their invested partners and business partners from a broadcast standpoint and a sponsorship standpoint, meaning the large sports gambling apps, which I got no problem with that, but they take so much money and they have so much business partnership with those apps, I would assume, went to the NBA and said, hey, we need people to continue to be invested in watching and following Pacer games and Jazz games and Pelicans games and Hornets games. And if you're running a league where teams are intentionally tanking and resting players and doing load management and coming up with fictional injuries, then we're going to have fewer people that are opening up our apps to place wagers, because they're not going to feel confident that they're getting the best possibility of winning the wager that they're placing. And so I think these apps basically said to the NBA, you need to assure your fan base, your ticket buying audience, and our viewing public that these games have as much integrity as they would hope that they do before they open the wager and spend their money with us. And so the Pacers and the Jazz became the two conduits to delivering that message. And Indiana jumped up to say, there's not a lot to this, and you can pick. Thank you. You gave us a ticket for going 59 miles an hour in a 55 zone on 465 at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't pretend that means we're the only ones that are doing it. And I think the NBA tried to send that message subtly and let it pass in the middle of the night. And Rick Carlisle said, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to bring a little more attention to this. And the NBA had to answer to it. And then I think that probably it quietly goes away. That would be my assumption. And I may be totally off base, but I'm still going to die on that hill.
Jake, you were the second person to make a traffic reference when I asked them about this. That's awesome. Because I also kind of think it's like that, where if you envision that every tanking team is driving on the interstate and the cops have to pull over two of them to find them. The Jazz were going the fastest. They were at the front of the line of cars speeding, and the Pacers were going the slowest, and they were at the back, and they just happened to get picked for that reason. And I think that also there was a timing element where they really wanted to have a message sent before All-Star because Silver was going to speak in front of a bunch of people. And then, of course, it was going to be a topic, and it was. I think that was a part of it. I think that what you said about the gambling part is a popular opinion. I don't know that I think it's just, I don't think personally about it as strongly as other people do. I think that the league is very concerned about basically a third of their season just being awful product games. They are. Like, the Pacers played 4 games in a row against where both teams were like not invested in winning. That sucks for everybody. But I do agree that this is now over. And it needed to be because we were at the point where the NBA said, hey, Pacers, you're wrong. And the Pacers were saying, hey, NBA, you're wrong. Like, they said inaccurate in the statement, right? What's the point of just going back and forth with statements about accuracy at some point?
Here's what I think. If you want to send the message to the people that follow the NBA that you are policing the tanking stuff, you pick the 2 franchises that don't necessarily transcendently make headlines.
That is, get the Kings out here, Jake.
They had decided to discipline this by fining the Lakers for resting LeBron and the Warriors for resting Steph Curry. Then you now suddenly have gone beyond just the NBA core audience, and you've created headlines that non-basketball fans are going to see, and they are negative headlines. So they picked the 2 that allowed them to send the message, but send it esoterically within their own snow globe.
Yeah, that's fair. I truly think that if they did this without, or with the suggestion or implication that Aaron Nesmith should have taken some medication or injected his hand to play in one game when they were whatever 15 and 40, like, come on, give me a break. That's like a non-starter for me, and that is ridiculous. I'd be curious on the NBA's specific interpretation of that, but they have not responded to anyone's question about that specific claim. Okay, Jake, I have held you for more time than I said I would. Would you like to promote your midday show, your station, Query and Schultz, any of the above?
Well, thank you. You can follow me on social media at Jake Query. That's JakeQuery. On the X Post Twitter, if that is still a website that people are using. And then also, yes, every day from noon until 3 on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan, it is Query and Company. Tony East is an active member of that company, appearing on the show. Eddie Garrison is the producer and bantering individual that you hear on there as well. And then Query and Schultz, I do with Derek Schultz each and every Tuesday. It airs at 7:30 on the ISC Sports Network.
The best duo there is, outside of when me and you talk every single Thursday on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line.
Nicely done, Tony.
Look at me go. Java House consumer, Tony East.
You know, that kind of smarts is why you're Tony East and your career is not going south.
Not yet. It will get there. I have yet to be caught in a scandal. Okay, thank you all, everybody, for tuning in today. We're back tomorrow talking Pacers Hornets. The Hornets are shockingly good. The Pacers are not playing well. We'll have all that tomorrow. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see ya very soon.